if you go to Merriam-Webster dictionary, or most any dictionary, and you look up the word codex, what you'll find is a manuscript book, especially of scripture, classics, or ancient annals. Now, it should hopefully you'll be making the connection as we go forward here that a codex is called this, excuse me, a manuscript book, especially of scripture, because the original books that were produced in the world were scriptural. They were classics. They were ancient, and that's why they were handwritten. As we've gone over, the handwritten books, the manuscripts that were originally produced, were so expensive. They were so labor intensive that that they were really only associated with the church, because only the church had the money that was necessary in order to produce that. Only the church had the labor force. Also, only the church really had the need for literacy or a group of people who were literate in order to work on books. Most people back in these times did not have jobs or daily lives that necessitated them being literate. So they wouldn't have wanted books. They wouldn't have needed books. They wouldn't have had anything to do with books. And it was only the church that had the time, the money, the resources in order to do this. So codexes back in the day really did mean manuscripts that were handwritten by monks in a scriptorium and were scripture or religious in nature. These days in new media theory, we refer to any book that is printed as a codex to separate them and differentiate them from electronic books. And this will become more apparent to you as we go forward in this course, why that distinction is going to be necessary. But I did want to introduce you to this terminology now. It will be coming back up over the course of the semester. Now here we are. The Book of Kells was actually written in Ireland. We're not sure exactly when. We think it was roughly around the 9th century. And the subject of the Book of Kells is the Gospels from the New Testament. Excuse me. We do know that the Book of Kells was produced in an Irish monastery, which is known as the Abbey of Kells. And the Abbey of Kells is located here in the country of Ireland, in the southeastern portion of Ireland. And this is a place that actually does exist, and the Book of Kells actually literally did come from this area. And it would have been considered a codex, and it also would be considered an illuminated manuscript. So it's an illuminated manuscript, which is an early example of a codex. Now, just to review what we went over for last week, an illumination or illumination book comes from the Latin illuminare, to enlighten or illuminate, and is the embellishment of a manuscript with luminous colors, especially gold and silver. Now, we watched in the video last week exactly how that process it comes about and how the pages become illuminated. Now, I do want you to note here that illumination means not only to light up the page literally with luminous colors, but it also can be used to mean metaphorically to light up the world with the message that is contained within the pages. So it's a very abstract or transcendental idea that books can be used to enlighten the mass of people. We still think about books that way today. So even if they're not literally illuminated, they are illuminating to us. And that's one of the big reasons why we want to be educated, why we go to school, why people in our culture encourage us to go get an education after high school, is so that we continue to be illuminated, to be enlightened. Now, an illuminator is an artist who produces an illumination. During late antiquity, illuminators constituted a professional class. That means that they were above the laborers or the working class. In the early Middle Ages, they worked within an ecclesiastical scriptorium as part of a team or were attached to a court. A court in this case would be a king's court or a queen's court, depending on who was reigning at the time. Now, again, once you pay attention to the fact that these people were professionals, they worked together within an ecclesiastical scriptorium. So this was a place where you produced scripts that was attached to a church. And that's exactly where the Book of Kells was produced. Now here again, coming back to the Cairo iota page. And I showed this to you last week, another example of it here. And this is one of the pages that really gets focused on in The Secret of Kells, because this is the most famous page within the most famous illuminated manuscript in the Western world. And I do want to show you a detail from the Cairo page to see some of the complicated detail from the actual page. Again, to reiterate what we talked about last week, it's sacramental, not educational particularly. So you're supposed to look at this and not learn exactly what happened in the Gospels of the Bible, but to be reminded of the sacredness of the text, the sacredness of the Gospels, to elevate your thoughts up to Jesus Christ and feel lifted up by the knowledge of his works that he had done within the Judeo-Christian tradition. This is what this page was meant to symbolize to the followers of early Christianity. And you'll notice again, I put here that it's aesthetics over utility. So the beauty and the symbolism of the page is more important than the usefulness of being able to communicate the details of the story. Okay, now if we go to the actual Book of Kells, which focuses on the creation of the Book of Kells, we have some characters that I wanted to go over their names just to make sure that everybody's on the same page about who they are. Our protagonist, Brendan, is an apprentice illuminator. He is the ward he's the nephew of the abbot Kellach. Excuse my Irish accent, it's not very good. And Kellach was a former illuminator, and he has turned his back on illumination and instead put all of his attention and his energy into designing a wall to prevent invasion. And so there's this theme that's basically set up within the film that in what way do we better ensure our safety? By building a wall in order to keep out invaders, or by turning our attention to books and spreading information that helps people to form basic connections to one another that will then strike down the barriers between us. And so the subtitle of this book is The Book That Brought Lightness to the Dark. And then it's supposed to be an alternative to building a wall. You might find a particularly salient time in American history to be thinking about this. How do we protect ourselves? How do we keep ourselves safe? Through building a wall or through building books and turning to education. Now, our other characters that we have are Brother Aiden, who is a master illuminator, and then we have Aisling, who is an air fairy. And she is a fascinating character. She is Brendan's muse in many ways, is leading him on to the ancient history that will help him to tap into and realize his own potential. He's having a hard time finding his way, deciding which path to follow. And Aisling the air fairy comes in to help him. So you see this real blending here of ancient Irish folklore and Christian theology coming together within this film, and an explanation of how the Book of Kells came to be. Now I'm going to pause here in order to start the next video, and in the next video I'm going to start off with a clip from the film I think is really important for us to pay attention to in order to understand the narrative. And also is going to start talking about some of the symbols and symbolism and parts of mise en scène that I asked you to look for in your worksheet for this week.